Welcome back to Morning in America. I'm Adrienne Bankert. As the nation mourns the loss of General Colin Powell, many are reflecting on the tremendous legacy he left behind. He was the first Black Secretary of State. His groundbreaking career served as an inspiration to Americans across the country. Joining us right now to talk about this is Hannah Trudeau, senior political correspondent at The Hill. Hannah, I know that we were able to cover and talk about so much of his legacy yesterday, but after learning of General Powell's passing, President Biden was quoted as saying that he was a patriot of unmatched honor and dignity. What else are we hearing from either the administration or other legislative officials today, as well as those in D.C.?
Good morning, Adrienne. That's right. And shortly after we heard the breaking news yesterday morning about General Powell's passing, I spoke to a senior Biden administration official who shared with me a personal anecdote about her last memory of seeing General Powell and just what it meant to her. And that conversation was over text with Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marcia Fudge. And I'm just going to read you what she texted me. I asked her to share a few thoughts about what General Powell meant to her. She said, "I last saw him at the inauguration. He was sitting behind me. It reminded me of how kind he was anytime I saw him. Understand, we were not close, but he always made you feel like his friend. He was obviously brilliant, a man of strong conviction, and deeply loved his family and his country." And Adrienne, I think that statement from Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marcia Fudge really underscores the general feeling that we've seen pour out for support and just beloved memories of General Powell yesterday, from the administration to lawmakers and across Congress to former administration figures across the aisle.
You know, that's something that we also made sure to touch on yesterday, was that he was remarkably adept at being able to work with those on the Democratic side, on the Republican side. Now, later, he actually became an independent, but the sentiment yesterday, and I think would continue into today, is that he was a man who was respected and very popular with people with different thoughts, with different stances on different policy, and really he was someone who was led by policy. What legacy do you think he has in the D.C. community, but also across the world?
Yeah, that's right. I think he has left a lasting impression on so many young leaders and aspiring public servants. You know, like you mentioned, he had such an outpouring of bipartisan support of people who consider themselves even non-political or apolitical independents, the way that he identified himself in his later years. And I think one thing that is notable to me yesterday was listening to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's remarks, who essentially said he felt like he had a hole in his heart after learning of the news of Powell's death. And that really speaks to this feeling of how he sort of left people with this impression that he was, some had called him a man of valor yesterday, that he had a positive impact on his community, obviously being the first Black Secretary of State, also the first Black National Security Advisor, and the first Black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, these are major accomplishments and things that really anybody in this country can look up to and aspire to be.
Absolutely. He was definitely quoted as saying that it was a chance for him to actually show as a model that if you pursue a dream, if you pursue a goal and stick with it, you can achieve anything. Hannah Trudeau, thank you so much for being with us.